everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're not already and you'd like to be, I would love for you to subscribe and click that thumbs up button so I know you'd like to see more videos just like this one. Okay, now today we're going to do a paranormal story, a true paranormal story about the house I currently live in. So stay tuned. Okay, so before I get started with my actual house story, let me give you a little background story of where I live. In 1937, a huge flood happened on the Ohio River all the way into Evansville, where I live, and it covered everything, all the way from the river all the way to the whole north and east side. I mean, this whole city was underwater, okay? So I'll show you a few film clips and a little bit of history about this area. And then when I tell my story, it'll make better sense. So we started our journey at the McCurdy. Now, the McCurdy is a huge hotel here in Evansville, Indiana. It's been a hotel. It's been like a senior's home. It's been a lot of things. And now they're currently reconstructing and taking it back to its former glory. Back then, the McCurdy was huge, and that was the big hotel, and it was very fancy and glamorous, and everybody that was anybody went there. Well, what happened is when the flood happened, that's where the boats all met. So the Coast Guard, the police, all the boats met right there at that particular place. So I'll insert that clip now. Now, from the McCurdy, it went all the way back to where my house currently is. So the clip I'm getting ready to show you now is the library, the West Branch Library, that's actually located in front of my house. And then actual Franklin Street, which you guys have seen before in my vlogs, but I'll give you another short view of it. And then I'll show you my house all the way to the backyard and the pool, because this is what my story is all about. So I'll insert that here. Now that you have a little back history on the flood and everything that happened around my house, now I can tell you the story. Okay, so we moved into this house I guess it's about 4 years ago now. And there's a nice in-ground pool in the backyard. It's made of concrete. It's really nice. It's big. It practically takes up the whole yard. And I was like, wow, we are lucky to get this nice pool, right? Okay, well, as you've heard me say before in other vlogs, I left a 1904 farmhouse that was haunted to come live into a 1905 Victorian that's also haunted, but again, what place isn't, right? But what makes this place unique is it's right next to the funeral home. Now, why would T get a house next to a funeral home when you know that that's kind of like an open door for spirits coming and going? It's kind of like the airport, and they're just leaving and coming, leaving and coming. Okay, well, I like the house. It's beautiful. I've always loved this house and I wanted it. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about that it's next to a funeral home, and I'm just going to get the house and deal with it. Okay. Well, the first 3 nights that I was here, I kept having this dream. I dreamed that my house was like a morgue, like a mortuary or morgue. You know, where they prepare the bodies for like the funeral, where they embalm it and stuff. I dreamed that in the basement, that's where it was all set up, and that there was a tunnel that went from here to the funeral home. So when they were done embalming them, they would just roll them in a tunnel underground to the funeral home next door, which back then I think was a church, but they held funerals there. So now that it's a funeral home, they probably do all their embalming and stuff there. But back then they probably had the church, but you know, the funeral actual where the embalming and all that took place probably wasn't that far away, because how would you like transport caskets? Yeah, I don't know. So, but I had these dreams that that's what this was, and that there'd be a man in the basement, and he'd be embalming people, and you know, he'd be getting them ready for the funeral and then putting them in the tunnel, scooting them under the ground over to next door, you know. And I had this dream for about 3 nights in a row. Now, I never saw the man like in spirit in waking life. I only dreamed about him. So this is why I got so confused in the beginning. Well, on the 3rd or 4th night is when I had a dream about the pool. I had a dream that this whole area was flooded. Now, mind you, this is before I even knew about the flood. I didn't even know about the flood. You know, I was born in the 70s. I wasn't born in like the, you know, 30s and all that, you know. But until I started having these dreams and started investigating what my house was and next door and all that, I wasn't even really aware that there was a flood, you know. So I had this dream that our house was not underwater because it's kind of on a hill, but I dreamed that, which I'm sure it was, but I dreamed that the basement was like flooded, and like all the embalming things were like in the like water floating. And I dreamed that where my pool is now had bodies buried, and they were floating to the surface of the water, and that all the bodies in the caskets had come up. Now, why there were bodies and caskets buried in my yard, I don't have any idea, but that's what I was dreaming. Well, I learned that this pool was put in after the flood. So I'm like, oh my God, wait, you know, so it all started to get weird. Like, I started getting validations, and this was like just my dream. I thought, okay, that's weird. And then we found out that there is a tunnel from here to next door, and what they used to do is the coal would be put in our chute here, and then they would carry it in like little things next door in like a little tunnel, but that's all covered up now. You wouldn't even known it was there. They bricked it all up. So it wasn't until I went downtown to see the plans for this house that I even knew that there was a tunnel. So it all started to get very weird, and I started getting all these weird validations, and I thought, okay, so surely they didn't dig up the backyard to remove coffins and bodies when the flood happened, and then they had to build the pool, because that's crazy. You know, they got this big hole. What do we do with it? Do we fill it with concrete and make a pool? I don't know what happened, but I kept having these dreams that that's what was going on. Okay, so you guys might have seen like my other video, like my haunted house from my old house where there was the man and stuff. Well, in this house there's also a man. My daughter actually caught the spirit on her webcam, and I put it in multiple filters, the same picture, so you could see the guy, and it looks like someone from like the early 1900s in the way that he's dressed, with the hat and the shirt and the little tie and stuff. So I'll insert that picture here. So after I started kind of investigating the house and what was here and what was really going on, I found out who used to live here and why. I found out that the guy who built this house owned the local drugstore, and him and his family lived above it. So after he built this house, shortly after, a big epidemic of influenza broke out, and everybody started coming to the house, knocking on the door all late at night and making him constantly get out of bed and go to the drugstore, get out of bed and go to the drugstore. So what he ended up doing was selling this house to the local grocer, and he ended up moving, him and his family ended up moving back above the drugstore, because he didn't want to keep getting out of bed. Now, why he would do that is strange to me. Let me tell you why. Because living above a drugstore couldn't have been as big as this huge house. I mean, I have like a 7-bedroom, 3-bath house, and it's huge. You know, it's like 4 stories. It's huge. Even the attic is finished out. Actually, that's where I'm filming now, and that's where my office is. I'll have to give you guys an office tour soon. But I actually, my office is in the witch's hat of the attic. I think they're called a turret or something. I don't know. I just call it a witch's hat because that's what it looks like. So that's where my office is. Well, it's so strange that he would leave this huge house to go live back above the drugstore. I could never figure that out. Well, then I found out that before this house was built, there was another house standing here. The weird thing is it doesn't say what that house or building was. It just says it was tore down in like 1857. Which is so strange to me, right? Because the visions I was having was like right at the flood. But if the bodies were already there and that's what it was before, and maybe it just held like that energy or whatever, and I don't know, but I know that that pool was built right after that flood. So I'm wondering if this was some type of mortuary / cemetery, and that they would take the bodies underneath to the church next door that's now a funeral home. I mean, I don't know, but I do know this. There's a man here, and the way the man is dressed looks like he might have been like a businessman or something like that. And the dreams I would have of the guy that was like the mortician type guy, he would be dressed the exact same way. Now, this guy is here and he never leaves. The one from the picture of my daughter's room I just showed you, he never ever leaves. He's here all the time. Now, he's not scary to me. I just kind of ignore him. But he stays in my daughter's room, which is my 22-year-old daughter. He stays in her room and scares her all the time. And I tell her just switch rooms, but she doesn't, you know, because she loves that room because it's the biggest upstairs. But she's constantly seeing him at her foot of her bed, and she's constantly hearing things, and he's knocking over things, and he breaks things in her room, and she's always catching him on camera somehow because this is his house and something got built on top of it, or that his place is no longer here and he's trying to find where his place is, and so he just kind of stays here because, again, I don't talk to him, but I do see him often. But it's crazy how I had all those visions before I knew anything about the flood, and then I find out, after I dreamed they built the pool because of the flood, I find out my pool was built after the flood. So sometimes I sit here, and as a psychic and as a medium, and a clairvoyant, I have all these visions of things that a lot of the time are true, and so I'm worried that this one probably is true and that nobody is going to talk about it. You know, I did a graveyard reading not too long ago that's in my, it's over on TeeTV under graveyard readings, where I talked about how I felt like that there was a flood or something that washed all the caskets way down in this ravine, and they just left them because they didn't have a way to get them all back up, and even if they did, they wouldn't know where they go, so they just left them there. That's what I feel like. I feel like that bodies raised up or caskets raised up in my backyard. I know, freaky, right? And they just took them somewhere to the cemetery or whatever and just kind of buried them and didn't know really who they were or which one was which, so they just kind of buried them, you know? And so that's what I feel like. And even though no historian and nothing I found is going to say, girl, that is true, because no one has told me it is true, and I haven't found any proof of what I'm saying is true. That's something I guess I'll never know, but I still have those dreams to this day. I still dream about the guy. He still walks around my daughter's room, and yeah, that's my true story of the house I live in. Now, as I end my scary story, you will find that we went to the river where it all began. And as you can see, it's rising again. So hopefully it doesn't get much worse, because I definitely don't want another flood like 1937. watching. Bye.